opportunities for telcos with programmable communications. We have a really excellent panel today, and I'm going to ask them just to very quickly introduce themselves. Sasha, can you get us started, please?
Thanks very much, Raul. My name is Sasha Garam, the president of Candy Solutions, an ABCT company. I head up all aspects of our CPaaS, UCaaS, and CCaaS offerings. So look forward to participating in the panel today.
Mehmet, can you continue, please?
Yep, no problem. My name is Mehmet Hussain. I'm the head of solutions for Voxbone, now Bandwidth, and I head up all the pre-sales activity for the legacy Voxbone portion of the Bandwidth organization.
Thank you. Edwin.
My name is Edwin van Ierland. I'm the CCO within iBasis, responsible for all the global commercial activities. iBasis is now an independent company, a result of an acquisition by Tofaan Global and a merging of, let's say, 4 or 5 companies together, becoming all part of Tofaan Global.
Thank you. And I am Raul Castañón. I'm an analyst with the 451 Research. We're now a part of S&P Global Market Intelligence, and I have been looking at business communications and more specifically CPaaS for the last 6, nearly 7 years. So the topic of our conversation today is centered on understanding how communications platform as a service is evolving, and mainly what is the impact for telcos communication service providers. One thing that I have been discussing with all of you over the last few years is that the conversation for communications platform as a service has very much centered on a developer focused approach and also on the API layer. However, there are more dimensions to CPaaS. And from our perspective as an industry analyst, I have seen the conversation now going in different directions. So in addition to the API layer, we're seeing a lot happening now at the network level. There is also increased conversations centering on the diversity of APIs. So definitely beyond SMS, voice, we're now seeing a wide range of use cases. And the other relevant issue that I have seen coming up in the last 3 to 5 years is the enterprise segment. So rather than focusing on the digital native companies, developers, and startups, it now seems to be opening up to a wider audience. So my question to our panelists is, do you agree with this assessment? And with this in mind, how do you see the role of telcos emerging? Maybe can we start with you, Sasha?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Raul, and there's no doubt the definition and the thought leadership around CPaaS has certainly evolved. I think when it first started, telecoms historically have been very, very complicated. You go back historically, even in the data communication side, we had standards like ATM and frame relay superseded by IP and MPLS and other things later. Simplicity always wins. And CPaaS, I think, started with a noble concept that's not new, where we wanted to mask the complexity of the telecommunications network and enable toolkits to enable folks developers, largely to start with, to embed real-time communications into applications and business process flows, which make a lot of sense for productivity. That has evolved. Embedded communications is one part of it. Developers are one part of it. And there's no doubt, and other folks in the industry have proven that developers are increasingly key influencers in IT organizations and so on. But where CPaaS started and where it's going are very different. CPaaS started with largely B2C and customer engagement use cases. That's evolving now. It's heading into the private enterprise, into large enterprise with employee-to-employee communications, with B2B communications. And we're seeing use cases that we're working with in Candy where folks have 30,000 software developers in their IT organizations as part of a finance company and want to take back control and develop their own user experience using CPaaS toolkits that bridge with legacy assets, UCaaS as well. So we're seeing a world where legacy assets, employee-to-employee, and B2B communications is intermingling with more early day B2C CPaaS toolkits, and it's all kind of marrying together. And I think there's different applications for both worlds. So that's how we see it evolving.
Thank you. So, Mehmet, I think that in your case, you are right now in a unique positioning, given the acquisition and also the role in terms of connectivity. So I'm wondering what your experience has been and how you are seeing the landscape evolve.
So, in my opinion, the definition of CPaaS has been expanded over the years. So, as Sasha said, we know where it started. It was very much API and developer focused. It spreads across many different areas of the industry now, and APIs are just one part of a toolkit to enable a flexible approach to an entire industry. So from our perspective, what we are seeing is people applying a CPaaS style approach to the application, the logic, and the network layer, which is a way that I often talk about this industry. They are applying the CPaaS style mentality to these layers to try and get the most flexibility given the problems that they're facing as an organization. One of the most popular problems that are currently being solved at the moment is regulations. International telecoms regulations is a big problem. There are many ways of performing technical acrobatics to put people in and out of scope of regulations and assign lines of reporting in the right way. And this is only really possible when you are using a truly flexible CPaaS style approach. So for us, yes, CPaaS has evolved a long way. I remember whenever someone said CPaaS, the immediate thought was, oh, CPaaS, that's Twilio. It's much more evolved than that now.
So, Edwin, can we get your thoughts in terms of what the implications are for the telco world? Thinking about just these last highlights from our two other panelists, the growing role of the network, and then the evolving target audience now that it's a broader spectrum.
Let's say from an telco perspective, you can look at that two ways. The world is changing rapidly, so the market is already, and that's properly said by Sasha, is the enterprise market is already asking questions to the traditional telcos. Hey, provide me with services and not the traditional ones. From that perspective, they need to change very rapidly. The point Mehmet is saying, indeed, is about the knowledge of regulation. The telcos traditionally have a love-hate relationship with the local regulators and try to avoid to have a confrontation in that arena with the regulation going on. And you see that they invested a lot in that knowledge bridge. However, from a wholesale perspective, it becomes then very complicated, because where do you bridge the enterprise need or the business to consumer or consumer to business need and translate it into a wholesale perspective? And that is where the telcos are significantly lacking any growth or ideas in that. If you look at Twilio, MessageBird, and all the others, they really know how to deal with that. However, I think there is still a very important role for, let's say, the traditional wholesale entity in the telco and the independent wholesalers to bridge the old and the new world together. Still, we need to terminate the call, whether we like it or not, and that termination is in the hands of the parties who knows the traditional business going forward, and that's where the old and the new world comes together. Quality of service, that is something a telco always has a very high let's say, quality of service standard. And even in the old telephony days and old ISDN and ADSL time, it was normal that there was no disruption on your quality of service. That's a little bit different in the new environment, because we see that there is delay, or there is Wi-Fi or a Wi-Fi issue. There are other issues which we cannot control end to end. And so the high performance networking controlled by the telco as such, how can we use that and incorporate that in the fast developing API environment as such? That is an interesting development going forward. I think last year proves that two worlds are rapidly coming together, and it's a steep learning curve for everybody in that in that chain. 1 year ago, I was not aware that this could evolve in this rapid growth going forward with porting numbers, massive porting numbers, enabling Microsoft Teams, combining that with direct routing and direct calling facilities. Authentication was rapidly deployed. You see a massive increase of services which we never thought of, but you cannot do that independently. Old and new world needs each other, and that is currently what's happening. We only see that the telcos are lacking of progressively adopting that change. That is a fact of life at this moment.
Thank you, Edwin. So you're bringing up a couple of interesting points that we have been looking at. So the opportunity certainly seems to be rapidly expanding. I can mention that our market monitor forecast before the pandemic was nearly 30% year over year compounded growth through 2024. Now, during the pandemic, we made some adjustments because there was a slight downturn, but all of a sudden we noticed that demand was accelerating. So we actually ended the year with a higher forecast than we had anticipated pre-pandemic. So with this in mind, and then also with the key points that Edwin was highlighting, I would love to get your opinion in terms of what this means for the telco world. Sasha, what could be your insights here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's kind of two faces to this. One is telcos, like you said, need to inevitably terminate the call, which Edwin's absolutely right. And the old world of thinking about that is about minutes, termination, rate cards, that kind of stuff. And with the CPaaS, CAGR and market growth only accelerating, with the pandemic and, leapfrogging 5 years on the digital transformation journey, it means consumption on the telecom networks and the wholesalers. And to me, CPaaS is just another way of unlocking the walled garden. Your API enabling the walled garden, you're going to drive consumption. So as a whole, I think for especially telcos who've had declining minutes, who are doing traditional things that do the regulatory, the E911, the lawful intercept, do all the hard traditional stuff, it's a good thing for them because we're unlocking a new revenue channel. So that's one part of it. I think the second is with CPaaS players coming and masking the complexity of these telecom networks, no matter whether it's 2 or 3 different telecom networks, you're normalizing the access to these networks and making it simple. You're empowering independent software vendors to create new applications and vertical solutions. And I think what we've seen with telecoms, in my experience, is that telecom sales folks are still in transition. Selling APIs and SDKs is very hard. Selling a SIP trunk or an MPLS circuit or a box is easier. And selling minutes is easier. But if you can sell a solution or an application that is enabled by CPaaS, that is something more traditional and helps with the cultural transformation of sales within the telecom as well. And I think that's the second front, is these vertical-based solutions to go after very vertical markets.
So one issue that I have seen probably earlier in the emergence of CPaaS, but I think it's still valid, is that, and Edwin mentioned it, that the world of programmable communications, developer-focused applications, is more for companies like Twilio, Nexmo, MessageBird, rather than the telcos. What could be your recommendation, Mehmet, for telcos that are looking at CPaaS as an opportunity for growth?
My first recommendation would be don't see this as a barrier. This is not a barrier; it's an opportunity. We are a prime example. What Voxbone have historically done is gone around the world, taken lots of disparate, localized networking resources, joined them up into a truly global proposition, which is unique in the industry with a greater coverage than anybody else. We've taken the traditional world, used modern cloud-first technologies to bring it together with the demands that the CPaaS industry is asking for. The capability exists. The knowledge that the traditional telcos have is rare and not well disseminated in the industry. Capitalizing on that historical experience is going to be vital, but don't wait, don't hold back. The industry's not moving, the industry's moved. We saw, in my opinion, we saw 3 to 5 years worth of transformation in the period of 12 months. There were so many companies that fast forwarded their digital transformation journeys and just said, oh, we've been thinking about this for 3, 4, 5 years, but now we've all got to leave the office, we've just got to do it now. That decision was made thousands of times over, which will push the industry forward. It's too late to think about how much longer can I sweat the asset of my box that terminates in ISDN. That needs to go away now.
Thank you. So what needs to happen for telcos to regain the role that they can play in the CPaaS value chain? Edwin, what would be your thoughts?
First of all, it's also what Sasha said. I think they have a new revenue channel laying in front of the door. They have a good network. They have the relationship with the enterprise community already. So let's say denying that is the biggest mistake they can make. So they should embrace and use their, let's say, the premise services they can offer, the cloud communications services they can offer. But they should also step into the new world from, okay, how do I then interconnect with the outside world? How do I bring the message across the world? And that is where you see API interconnection, the new way of interconnecting with each other on wholesale level is a difficult topic to discuss. 1 year ago, everybody was thinking, okay, I know a TDM interconnect, I know an IP interconnect, I know a SIP interconnect. But you're talking about an API interconnect of voice, SMS and other services. How is that going to work? I think, that is inevitable, that they need to make that step and learn fast from the Twilios, the MessageBirds, and the other parties in this environment. But still, the knowledge is extremely rare in the telco environment. The services they traditionally offer, we often underestimate that. The knowledge they have about the local regulation is so extremely high that they can still use that. So it's a matter of time, and I think they will catch the train and start traveling as well, and perhaps even equally fast than what the other companies are doing.
Sasha, so you have experience with some of those telcos that have gotten on the train probably earlier than most. Can you share what your experience has been and any learnings?
Yeah, look, I think Edwin is a perfect segue from Edwin. I mean, we have to acknowledge this is a very early stage market. It's exciting because we've seen some great IPOs and stocks perform. We're seeing an amazing market grow, the pandemic with the acceleration. But the truth of the matter is we're in the very early innings, to use a baseball analogy, and the telcos, inevitably, the ones who do adopt and transform, will be at the table. And to Edwin's point, what do the telcos have as a barrier to entry? What's old is new, right? They've got the billing relationship, they've got the data communications and SIP trunking and MPLS, but most importantly is the procurement. It's a procurement relationship. Think about a Fortune 1000 company. Anybody who wants to do business may take 2 years to get a contract. And they already have one bill for everything else, mobility, landlines, datacom. So the carriers are very strategically positioned. It may not be as sexy, but the old is new. They inevitably have to API enable their walled garden, whether they're feeding into a Voxbone bandwidth or a Twilio. They're going to have to fit in. They're going to have to make it easy to interconnect to play in this new world. And they have that incredible medium and large enterprise barrier to entry overcome already, and that's where the market's going to move. I think right now we have early proof points with SMB and the lone wolf developer in an IT organization who does a small little POC or something like that. The big market's still to come, and the carriers are in the best position, in my opinion, to do that.
So with this in mind, can the three of you help us understand where the opportunities are? What could be the low-hanging fruit, and what could be some of the examples of services that telcos should be considering and looking at today?
I'll go first.
Thank you.
So, for we've already established that the telcos have already got a really complex capability, a handle on it. They know what to do with number porting in that certain country or regulations, etc., etc. What they now need to do is represent this to their customers in a way that their customers want it. And the way that their customers want it is real time, via API, or via portal, or via this, or via that, but it shouldn't be limited. It shouldn't be, I need to email my account manager and say, can you give me the update about what's happening in the Netherlands, please? That's a crazy way for an organization to share information that exists. It should, all of these complex workflows that they've already gotten a hold of should be available via API and automated systems. So the first step for them, for any telcos that are not doing this, look at how you are selling the services that you are selling. Automated purchases are a really easy first step to make. For example, our entire inventory is available real-time via API in every country. There are services that you can just take that are off the shelf that will enable you to do that. You should be looking at these things first because the competitors in the market are already doing it.
Thank you. Edwin, any examples of services that could be good ideas for telcos?
Yeah, let's say I want to approach a little bit different from a wholesale perspective as a telco, because the telco is serving the enterprise world, and I think we have tackled that part, what the telco needs to do. Let's say at the same time, let's say the wholesalers behind the telcos, they need to go to that same development phase. And they need to adapt, okay, what is going on? Things have rapidly changed. We see a declining trend on voice. We thought that SMS A2P was dead, and then suddenly it came back fantastically. We see IoT things happening at the same time. Let's say the main differentiator is now how can we adapt and indeed demonstrate our wholesale knowledge in the same way that we can broaden the interconnection model to the telcos. So that the telcos will be enabled two ways. First of all, by the demand of the enterprise world or the end customer, because that is where they are enforced to make the change happen. At the same time, enable them in the background with, let's say, the new opportunities and enable them with the API marketplace, enable them with the API opportunities in the API portals, and give them a push as well from a wholesale perspective. In the past, wholesale was always seen as safeguarding the revenues of the telco. Now, that's not longer the case. We see that from a wholesale perspective, we sometimes see developments in the market more rapidly, more faster than the telco sees it. So we give them the push as well. It's interesting to see this because I've been in recent discussions in the preparations of the WAS this week with other telcos about sharing the API marketplace. Can we create, let's say, an independent marketplace where we can host all these APIs from a telco environment and make that happen? And then the only thing what you see is raising the eyebrows because, okay, we never thought about that. How can we become part of that community and how can we leverage that? And what Sasha said, it's a fast learning curve we see. I do not want to predict 1 year from now where we are, but hopefully we will make the train a high-speed train and we can hardly see and predict what's going on in the next phase.
So just following up on this idea, and as we start to close the conversation, you brought up some interesting topics in terms of enabling, developing an offering, and also the business development part. So Sasha, I'm wondering if you can comment in terms of what strategies have been successful for telcos that are already engaging with CPaaS offerings.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lessons learned, and I think for larger, especially tier one telcos, the biggest barrier to entry to being successful in this market space is the cultural transformation. And we started with some of our carrier partners by going all the way to the extreme. You know, how do we compete with some of these newer entrants in the market who are stealing our minutes and our lunch? And we've had to actually reverse our strategy a little bit. So we put the cherries on top. That's all ready to go. And we've got the digital portals and the self-service models similar to some of the other competitors out of the market. But we've retracted to put something a little bit more familiar in front of the business development and sales professionals who work at these carriers. And I'll give you an example. Microsoft Teams has been a huge hit this year. We talked about the expanding definition of CPaaS. Well, off-net calling for Microsoft Teams is an embedded voice application. We are launching that, a direct routing as a service, embedded voice that's fully digital. That's part of our CPaaS offering, to extend the definition. We're extending reach. We're partnering, with folks who provide international coverage and taking that complexity out, because Fortune 1000 companies have branch plants all around the world. You need to solve that problem. We can make it simple. We're pitching things like traditional SIP trunking, which carrier salespeople know how to go sell. That's a good stepping stone to CPaaS. And last but not least, turnkey applications. That helps whet the appetite. So our contact center offerings, omni-channel contact center offerings built on the CPaaS are a great way to open the door, provide flexibility, some customization capability. So we're trying to taking a step back. We're trying to take a baby step with the carriers towards something that we feel their salespeople are ready to sell. Microsoft Teams or the top SIP trunking, the applications, those types of things, and then walk our way towards a fully API economy. But it'll take time. It's a cultural transfer.
Thank you. So I just want to recap on something that you said in terms of competing. One thing that I repeat to those in the telco world is that even though the CPaaS segment is very closely associated to a developer-focused approach, from our perspective, the opportunity is much bigger than that. So it means that there are opportunities that many vendors currently in the space might not necessarily be addressing, but the telcos are probably very well positioned to tackle, as Mehmet said. So in the last 3 minutes that we have, I would like to ask each of you to maybe sum up what your recommendations and conclusions, the takeaway message for telcos could be. Mehmet, can you start, please?
Closing comments, recommendations. Look at what you can already do. Make it available to everyone who wants it, and don't introduce any barriers to information that you have. The stuff that you have is valuable. Commercialize it and give it to people.
Thank you. Edwin.
I think telcos in general, what they should do is leverage all the systems and knowledge they have, like the billing systems, GDPR knowledge, a topic which we easily forget, but also the security on that network. I think these are crucial elements going forward, where old and new world will be combined. The example Sasha mentioned on Microsoft Teams Direct is a perfect example where old and new world come together, and where you start talking about the revival of international free phone numbers and the mobile DRDs and the DRDs and et cetera, et cetera. And that is where, let's say, do not underestimate the knowledge of the telcos. I think they should be proud and use the investments and the knowledge going forward, and combine that with the ideas of the developers in the new world as well. And I think that is the best model in the end for the end consumer market, whether that's enterprise of business or the end consumer, that's not relevant. Let's say we will all need that knowledge all together. So bundle it and package it.
Thank you. And Sasha, what could be your closing comments?
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree with what Edwin and Mehmet said. I'll just add one more comment. Telcos today easily strike checks to go and invest in 5G, in media companies, in laying fiber to the home. When it comes to investing in bridging the old with the new and unlocking the value of those, those skill sets, the regulatory, all the things Edwin just talked about, the investment's so much harder to go get. And this is the right time for telcos to reevaluate their investment thesis as those 5G networks and other things build out. And this is a perfect place to invest, because the bridging of the old and new is here and now, and the next 5 to 10 years are going to be very fruitful for those that make the transition.
Thank you, everyone. My closing comments could be to thank everyone, first of all, for your thoughts. We look at the CPaaS opportunity, as I mentioned when we started off our conversation, from different angles. And mainly what we're seeing right now is that initial definition that centered on developers and native digital native companies has expanded significantly. We see a really important opportunity. There's a wide space with plentiful use cases that have yet to be addressed. We do expect that this opportunity will probably significantly increase the opportunity. So we will probably have to do yet another revision in the next 6 months for our forecast. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the year after the pandemic. So thanks everyone for your insights. I really appreciate everyone's participation today. Thank you.